Payday 2 is easily my favorite game of all time. There's just something so exhilarating about gunning down police officers in the street. In video games. But after 10 years of playing Payday 2 almost religiously, I've gotten a little bored of it. The game's publisher Starbreeze has kept me hooked with the promise of more on the horizon. All I have to do is keep funding its development by buying ostentatious amounts of DLC. After 7 years of development and hype, the third Payday game is finally here. And it's not Payday 3. Last month, this mobile abomination was haphazardly dumped onto the App Store to a resounding wave of... But why didn't anyone care? In order to answer that question, we have to look into the history of Payday Crime War. Payday Crime War started development in 2016. It was originally marketed as a 4v4 player versus player game in the same vein as Left 4 Dead's Versus mode. In Crime War, players would take control of either the clown-masked Payday gang, or the SWAT officers trying to stop them. Fans have been asking for a PvP feature since Payday the Heist, and Starbreeze was finally looking to deliver, only with one small caveat. It's a mobile-exclusive gacha game.
What inspired you to build a second
mobile game
right next door to the original? Money!
So Starbreeze bought up a mobile indie game studio, Badfly Interactive, and tasked them with bringing Payday to the dreadful Black Mirror. Not far into the game's development, Starbreeze's executives were accused of committing a teensy-weensy little bit of insider trading. And so, in what can only be described as life imitating art, the company that published Payday was raided by SWAT teams. This led to multiple international investigations and caused both the CEO and CFO to step down from their respective positions. While this whole debacle was going on, the entire corporation was basically on fire. Starbreeze was bleeding money, and they needed to undergo a massive restructure. So, they laid off 25% of their employees. One of the unfortunate victims of this mass firing was Badfly Interactive, who were axed about halfway through Crime War's development. But wait, if the developers were cut from the project, how did the game come out? Poorly. So, the unborn fetus of Payday Crime War was left to rot in development hell. Someone had to try and raise this dumpster baby as their own child. That responsibility fell onto the toes of Pop Reach Games. Halfway through the second crack in development, the beta tests for Payday Crime War dropped to mostly negative reviews. Pop Reach realized that they needed to shift priorities and switch the game's focus from PvP to PvE. This shift meant that 2 more years were required to develop this game. All the while, fans just kind of forgot that the game was even in the works. I think even the developers forgot too.
John Madden.
Overall, Payday Crime War took an entire console generation to release. And after all that time, how does the game stack up? Well, let's take a look. Payday Crime War is mostly just a port of Payday 2, which, in my opinion, isn't a bad thing. The base experience is still intact, albeit scaled back. The game has 5 co-op heists to choose from, and all credit where it's due, the heists they picked for this port all lend perfectly to quick dopamine hits. Bank Job, Jewelry Store, Art Gallery, 4 Stores, and Shadow Raid all make an appearance, only this time slightly different. Once I saw one of these changes, I started noticing them everywhere. They could be innocuous, like the bank heist having the fire starter door, or they could completely change the map's layout, like the case with Shadow Raid cutting its entire depot. These cramped maps, in tandem with the lower cop spawn rates and lack of special enemies, do a great job at capturing the good old days of starting out in Payday 2. It's weird to say, but I feel really nostalgic while playing this port. One of the things I had to learn early on in Crime War is that you need to be much more mindful of where your bullets are going. That's because the civilians are much more crucial in this game than they were previously. If you shoot too many, your notoriety will rise and more difficult enemies will begin to spawn. I had to break my conditioning of shooting civilians whenever I'd ran out of zip ties.
We're breaking the conditioning!
Performance-wise, this game runs like shit. Even after dropping my settings as low as they could go, I couldn't even get a stable 30 frames per second. I guarantee you that this isn't an issue with my phone, this game is just poorly optimized. This game was horribly rushed, and as such is incredibly buggy. Despite shifting direction after the beta, the PvP content is still here, just a shell of what was promised. They couldn't even deliver on the one cosmetic change that would have set this apart from the other games. playable cops. A bulk of the marketing surrounding Payday Crime War was focused on the fact that you had a customizable SWAT officer to use in the PvP mode. Concept art and gameplay showed that you could play as special enemies like bulldozers in an attempt to stop the Payday gang from completing their heist. These are nowhere to be found. Instead, Crime War slapped a gaudy red outline around enemies just like Overwatch. The only other visual indicator that an enemy is an enemy is the color of their gloves. Theirs are red, so you know they're the bad guys.
Now you're trying to make me out to be the bad guy.
Yes, I'm trying to make you a bad guy. We're both bad guys. We're professional bad guys. Ding. Hello.
Remnants of the old game design are still hidden in this game, like the PvP loot box featuring cops and robbers on it. Man, I really wish we had a decent cops versus robbers game, and I'm not talking about Battlefield Hardline. When it comes to competitive multiplayer, there's only one mode, aptly titled Cash Grab. I'll let the jokes come to you. In Cash Grab, your team fights to steal money from the enemy team's safe while keeping your team's safe safe. The team with the most money wins. It's a pretty simple premise for a pretty simple game mode. This mode only has 2 maps to play on, Golden Green Casino and Transport Crossroads, only this time completely reimagined to fit a Call of Duty style 3-lane map design philosophy. I'm not too critical of it, but I know plenty of people who hate Call of Duty maps, so I figured I'd mention it here. When I found a game, I had a good time with Cash Grab. A lot of these games were nail-bitingly close, others were complete washouts. That's because this game is pay to win. More on that later. The biggest issue with Crime War's PvP isn't the players themselves, but rather the lack of them. I never played a match with more than one other person in this mode. Most of the time I was just fighting bots. Enough for me to know that Bot Chains will always guard the safe, and Bot Dallas, Wolf, and Hoxton will always take the same route every single life, every single map, every single game. Thankfully, blasting these enemies is a blast.
As long as you got one of these babies.
Wow.
One of Payday 2's biggest draws is the vast arsenal, and Crime War does not disappoint. A large chunk of the game's original armory is on display here. Some of these are base game guns, others are DLCs that were added later. I appreciate the huge variety of firearms, however the way you unlock and upgrade them is, for lack of a better term, fucking infuriating. All of Payday Crime War's progression is tied entirely to gacha-style loot boxes. You want a sight for that fancy G3? Try your luck on the old slot machine. You want to play as your favorite character? You want to stand out from the rest of the peons and clown masks? Well, now you gotta either buy the battle pass, get lucky on some unregulated gambling, or connect to our telemetry service so Starbreeze can track your every move in all of their games all of the time. These loot boxes are just really bad game design. You get one loot box after every heist you complete, and you have to wait anywhere from 7 to 20 minutes for them to open. Or you can fork over a couple of bucks in premium currency for a chance at some better loot. These loot boxes give you a bunch of duplicate guns. Using these duplicates lets you upgrade said guns, which gives you some XP towards upgrading your account. Which brings me to my biggest issue with Crime War. This game is pay to win. Buying loot boxes to upgrade your guns puts you at a direct advantage over free players who use what the game gives them. I don't know how companies are still getting away with this kind of stuff, but why am I even complaining? Nobody even fucking plays this game. Payday Crime War stands as everything I hate about live service trash. Hindered progression, lack of player expression, all for a game that still isn't finished. But thank God that Cash Shop still works without a hitch, right? While I was in the middle of editing this video, my friend Vespilord showed me that this game is even lazier than I originally thought. At least 50 of this game's art assets are AI generated. Even though Poppereach bought the assets to the first version of Crime War and were capable of making new profile pictures themselves, they were so unapologetically lazy that they just didn't want to make anything new. So instead, they slapped a bunch of prompts in a neural blender and came up with this trash. The worst part about these AI pictures is that they don't even look good, but are asking you to spend money on them. I mean, look at some of these. What the fuck is this even supposed to be? It should go without saying, but AI art is not a substitute for the real thing. Companies will do whatever they can to save a quick buck, and if that means not hiring real artists, then so be it. This is no longer speculative fiction. AI is actually stealing jobs from people. Artists were already struggling enough during the pandemic, but this is a whole new level of crisis. So do whatever you can to support small artists. Artists like Vesperlord here, who, unlike Pop Rage, doesn't need to use an AI to make a profile picture. Payday Crime War tells me everything I need to know about the future of the franchise. It'll look just like this. An unfinished live service game that'll keep begging you to swipe your credit card at every given turn. You don't believe me? Leaks have already confirmed that Payday credits exist as a premium currency in Payday 3, an item shop being implemented into a game before it even hits beta. So, just like Halo and Doom before it, another one of my favorite franchises falls victim to the clutches of games as a service. And if you don't like it, you can just go back and play the old games, right? Right? Oh, you fuckers.